I've had a lot of new bros join my corp over the last few years. They're honestly what keeps me playing the game, I think. It's easy to forget just how much the game changes over time as you gain knowledge and practice, so it's fun to experience Eve vicariously through the eyes of a new bro when teaching them the ropes. There are, however, some consistent beats that a lot of new bros hit during their first few days, weeks, and months in the game. For a lot of them, that's industry. So consider this a bit of an open letter to any players wanting to get into industry early in their Eve career. Eve has a reputation online for its big space battles and Machiavellian schemes, often given real-world financial values by articles in the press. This gives a really early introduction to the concept and complexity of the player-driven economy in Eve, and with the popularity of games like Factorio and Satisfactory, it's no surprise that a big chunk of Eve's incoming players are captivated by the possibilities of Eve's industrial gameplay. Eve also benefits from an industrial system that is, honestly surprisingly given the state of many other mechanics in the game, quite simple. On the face of it, you have a blueprint. That blueprint tells you what it will make and what you need to provide in order to make it. The whole system has a very easy to learn but hard to master dynamic going on, which is great for getting people started. However, just as starting industry is a common early goal for new bros, they all seem to hit the same roadblocks of confusion and frustration. So let's talk about why industry in Eve doesn't work quite how people expect it if they haven't tried it out before. Everyone's first experience of Eve is in high sec. There's going to be some people who hear that and start immediately writing a comment acting like they've never left low sec, null sec, wormholes, whatever it may be. So let's just remember this isn't a pissing contest. Whether or not you chose to engage in the early game content or what the new player experience looked like when you started playing Eve, overwhelmingly that happens in high sec, and by and large people stay there for a little while. Some stay there forever, and that's fine too, but for many people the urge to explore their interest in industry hits while they're still living in high sec. Being in higher security systems just straight up makes industry more difficult in a few different ways. Worse planetary industry outputs, lower refining rates, more limited resource availability in asteroid belts. To be fair, CCP has lately been making this a much less impactful aspect of resource extraction. Only a couple of years ago you'd have no choice but to purchase a lot of minerals on the open market because they were exclusive, or at least highly prevalent in one area of the game compared to any other. However, this is definitely being relaxed a lot more now. High-Sec has much more resource availability than ever, Low-Sec no longer has a chokehold on isogen prices, and Null-Sec's Macoxit is much more plentiful and affordable than it used to be. There's no Satios in High-Sec anymore either, limiting you to an Asbal as your best available industrial complex. No running reactions, as the reactions service module cannot be installed in high-sec refineries, and because of the ease of accessing many of these high-sec systems, often a higher system cost index. That mostly depends on where you set up though. If you're in some random back-end system working out of a private Ritaru, then the system cost index will be pretty negligible. If you decide to start your industry in Perimeter, however, it's going to be a much bigger problem. That is perhaps the one benefit, however, logistics. Speak to any industrialist in Eve and you'll probably hear that logistics makes up the bulk of their actual playtime. Shipping things to and fro costs money if you outsource it, so expect to have to do a lot of this yourself, especially early on when you're unlikely to have sufficient economies of scale for the big profits. Being in high-sec puts you in easy reach of the trade hubs where selling your products is straightforward and the markets move fast. Don't confuse easy for quick though. Freighting high-volume goods around high-sec is just as, if not more, time-consuming than jump freighting those goods around low-sec or null-sec. This one is a dangerous trap that catches a lot of new bros off guard, unfortunately. Eve really appeals to the completionist mindset, and for that reason I'm constantly finding new players saving up billions of ISK to buy a blueprint original that they're going to need to spend months researching before it can possibly return a profit. Embrace the cooperation and friendship aspect of Eve, I beg of you. Outside of some of the most expensive high-value blueprints, you'd be surprised how many veteran industrial players or corporations are willing to part with fully researched blueprint copies free of charge to help you get started. If you're not in a corporation or you don't have any friends in Eve, then I recommend working on that because it really is a game changer, but if you're committed to that lifestyle, check the public contracts market in Jita. There is a flourishing industry of blueprint copies being sold there for dirt cheap prices. Sometimes if you do a little return on investment calculation between buying these blueprint copies in Jita or investing in your own blueprint original, you'd be surprised how often you'd need to be making absurd amounts of that module before it became cost effective. The real benefit of getting your own Blueprint original eventually becomes convenience rather than cost, but by the time you get to a stage where that matters, you will not need the tips in this video, I assure you. It's worth keeping in mind too that CCP frequently tweaks with the fees you need to pay for researching blueprints. A really big change was made to those recently, giving people with an established blueprint library a big advantage over those starting out. The research cost both in time and ISK is no small sum, so I strongly recommend only buying the Blueprint original for something if it's one of those ridiculously cheap ones, or if you're certain that the market for Blueprint copies isn't going to keep up with the demand and convenience that you need. Game knowledge is an important part of EVE industry. Sorry if that's a tough pill to swallow for someone who's new to the game, or perhaps is stuck to one very particular niche for a long time and doesn't really have a broad understanding of the game. This applies to station and regional trading too, and I remember being frustrated with this myself when I first started. Just like in the real world, if you rely on just numbers and technical analysis, you're occasionally going to be blindsided by exogenous factors that the numbers are never going to warn you about. There are many items in EVE with prices cyclical to both player-driven and lore-driven events. Christmas and Halloween, for example, have combat sites that people like to run in a particular way, using certain specific ships or weapon systems. The price for these modules and the ammo they consume will follow peaks and troughs in line with those events and can be easily anticipated thanks to that game knowledge. It would be very possible early on to see an in-game item that on paper is understocked and maybe looks like a good opportunity to manufacture, but only through fully comprehending what the item is for and why people are buying it can you expect to understand whether or not it's an opportunity worth investing in. I like to call this the used car problem. It's one of the biggest ways in which the EVE economy doesn't mirror the real world, and that's an issue because real-world capitalism is usually the only frame of reference for supply and demand that people come into the game with. Imagine for me, if you will, that you purchase a car from the dealership, brand new. You drive it around for maybe 10, maybe 15 years, but now you live somewhere different and you need a different car. Maybe you need a 4x4 because of the weather, or an SUV because you have kids now, so you decide to sell your car first. Imagine if you could take that car back to the dealership, drive it right onto the forecourt, and stick a price tag on it for $10 less than you bought it for. That's basically how things work in EVE Online, and it creates some real chaos on the price equilibrium for different items. In the real world, items decay with use, they lose value over time, and they require maintenance to keep in full working order. In EVE Online, items on the market are completely fungible, so my large shield extender is exactly the same as your large shield extender, even if it's been on a dozen different ships, been shot at countless times, and then gathered dust in my item hangar for 10 years. For this reason, demand in EVE is often not dictated by the amount of items purchased, but by the amount of items destroyed in combat, or at least abandoned in hangars of dormant accounts. Sometimes this can be completely turned upside down if in-game events lead to a resurgence of logins from otherwise inactive accounts, such as during an alliance changing staging, a large war, or a new expansion. This can kind of be lumped in with game knowledge, but it's really important to understand that just because something keeps getting listed and sold doesn't mean it's profitable to make. More experienced players will definitely be able to remember a time where they shipped a whole bunch of stuff they didn't need anymore to a trade hub and sold it to buy orders, or at least listed them as low price sell orders. People who are looking to liquidate stuff they don't need anymore are not price sensitive, so they'll be happy to sell well below the cost of manufacturing an item if it means quicker liquidation. A lot of people intuit this problem and then turn to consumables, which of course have a bit more protection from this concept since they're burned from the economy during use. So in theory there should be a relatively consistent demand for these items, but unfortunately since a lot of people have made this same realization, it's a very common place to start, and as such, a very well supplied market most of the time. Prevailing opinion in EVE is not to make T1 items when you're first getting started in industry. This is totally understandable advice and worth at least keeping in mind, but troublingly, I think a lot of new bros hear this and assume the inverse is true. So T1 items are not worth making, but T2 items must be worth making. That's not the case, I'm afraid, and you'll find plenty of T2 modules unprofitable to make. A wide variety of different programs exist for digging into the details and working out whether each specific item is profitable. EVE ISK per hour, EVE Guru, EVE Tycoon, Fuzzwork, EVE Cookbook, RavWorks, or even making your own calculator with EVE for Excel, but that could be worthy of its own video. Unlike plenty of other games, simply putting in the effort to make complex items does not guarantee your time will be well compensated, or even compensated at all. so sometimes you could be missing out on great profits on a T1 or faction item by writing them off in favor of T2 items. A lot of the issues with pricing and finding profitable items in EVE can be completely ignored if you're patient enough, and spoiler alert, this is one of the reasons that starting industry early in your EVE career sucks. For someone a couple of years into the game, having tens of billions of ISK locked up in dormant assets isn't a big deal. In your first few months though, I can hardly think of anything more demotivating than sitting on a pile of unsellable items that represent almost all of your net worth. Focus on having a secondary traditional source of income in the game alongside industry. Later on, when you have more experience, you can make big profits by investing in huge-scale manufacturing runs, moving these items around in bulk or gradually, and then waiting for a run on that item or a price rise. If you take a look at the EVE market or a third-party market data aggregation website like Adam for EVE, you'll notice that in the long-term scale, prices jump up and down all the time, but often oscillate around the same central price averages. If you can just wait for these prices to come around and train patience 5, you can make some big bucks. This doesn't even have to mean constantly watching the market. Many of these price oscillations happen on less than 90-day cycles, the maximum time for listing the items on the market. Just list your items at a price you'd be happy with that you've seen the item historically sell at. It doesn't matter if that puts you 10 or 20 places down on the list of sales orders, you have to be patient. As long as purchases outweigh sales listings, you will gradually gravitate to the top. This can also help you profit from bulk purchases. While a lot of sales, especially for ships and modules, are going to be one person buying a full fit that they need, quite frequently you'll see huge purchases going through as a corporation or alliance level logistics team stock up on something in advance of a big fight or a doctrine change, for example. Stuff like that can see your 10th place sell order suddenly jump to the top, or even get swallowed up and purchased completely. These are the sorts of things you cannot predict simply from plugging in the manufacturing cost and current G to sell price to a calculator. Never underestimate the price people will pay for convenience. This one definitely mirrors the real world. It's no coincidence that doing your grocery shopping at a convenience store would cost you a fortune compared to a supermarket. If you live pretty much anywhere other than high-sec, there's a really good chance that you could ignore the G to sell price of an item entirely when working out whether it's profitable to produce. Do your research on the local population, where many local trade hubs may already exist, and work towards filling that local demand instead of the wider game's demand in Jita. Not only will this allow you to price your stuff 10, 20, maybe even 30% higher than Jita with no complaints from your Corp or Alliance mates, but you're actually helping make other people's activities more convenient. There's always that one guy that will moan that you don't sell at the exact same price as Jita, but ask around and I bet you'll find that your friends would be more than happy to pay a premium for not having to import stuff from trade hubs. This one's a bit more difficult to grasp at first, and I found myself having to explain this to many new bros who get frustrated with the early game industrial experience. So many activities in EVE can be Sherpa'd, and by and large most players in EVE love showing off their skill sets and teaching new bros how to do different things in the game. Industry is often a glaring exception. Don't get me wrong, plenty of industrialists will give you similar general tips as I'm giving in this video, but what they won't do is hold your hand all the way to the finish line. There's no big conflict of interest in teaching someone how to run a certain mission or escalation or data site. The amount available throughout the game means that one extra player isn't going to make a great impact on things. Industrialists, however, often have put a lot of research and trial and error into finding niche markets and items they can manufacture to make money. They're unlikely to point you at an item and say, make this, that'll make you money, because there's a good chance that for them to have taken the time to analyze the profitability of that item and be confident in it being worthwhile to make, they are making it themselves. I hope some of this helped if you're fresh to the game and industry has appealed to you, or maybe you've been playing for years and want to explore a side of the game you've never previously interacted with. For all of you, as well as experienced industrialists, I'd love to hear any tips or common pitfalls of industry in the comments so that we can all learn together. Please do subscribe if you're interested in more content like this, and I'll see you for another video soon.